So last week at this time on the programme, we went over to New York and we met the president of a place called the Explorers Club. And because I'm a pop culture nerd, of course, I was playing a bit of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And straight away when I started talking to Richard Weiss, I knew we were going to have fun because he reckons the Explorers Club, well, they have a little bit to do with this theme tune.
I get to have my theme music coupled in there with Indiana Jones, who was actually based on a member from the Explorers Club, Roy Chapman Andrews. So Roy Chapman Andrews was a real guy. In fact, during the 1920s, he was shipwrecked in Indonesia. He's the guy who smuggled dinosaur eggs out of Mongolia during a civil war. He was president of the Explorers Club. He had a whip and he had a hat, and he was a pretty cool guy.
So I was hooked pretty much from the word go, and I said last week, and I meant it, we're going to spend a couple more weeks on this subject. It's so interesting. It's so broad. Once I started researching who I could talk to, the list just kept going and going. But the first thing I wanted to do was say, well, there's this club called the Explorers Club with chapters all over the world. Yes, we have one here. Let's meet them. The Australia and New Zealand chapter of the Explorers Club. The chair is Todd Tai. Delighted he joins me on the line. How are you, Todd?
Very good, Glenn. Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here on It's Not Just Cricket.
Well, I had such a good time with Richard last week. That's the HQ, isn't it? New York is the big one, but you are the chair of the Australia-New Zealand chapter. Tell me about it.
Well, yes, thank you. There's about 30 chapters around the world, and of course, New York is our home. It's where our big building is. But yes, we are a chapter of about 100 members in Australia. Our members are very active. Our chapter is considered to be a very active chapter.
Now, I imagine 100 members. I imagine it doesn't, me with a smiling face and an application form ain't going to quite cut it. Just what kind of crazy adventures do I have to have done in order to get into the Explorers Club?
Well, our two main areas that we're interested is in adventure and science, loosely speaking. And what you need to do is you need to contact our membership manager, David Strike, who will send you out the application forms, of which you put down your achievements in science and or adventure. You list down any notable publications you've been in, or any papers you've written, or articles, or anything of note. And then you need to get 2 letters of endorsement from existing Explorers Club members to vouch for the claims that you've made, and then your whole application form gets sent off to New York, where it's placed in front of a new members committee.
So the New York office has to sign off on everyone.
Absolutely, and if you have good news, you get a word back that you have joined this very special club.
Well, I felt like I'd achieved something by walking up 2 flights of stairs to get here to the studio, so I'm guessing I'm not going to quite make it, but who is in the club right now?
Well, our members we're very widely, but some notable members, and I do have 100. I can't go through all of them because they're all special, but probably the most notable one right now would be Richard Harry Harris, who was the Australian anaesthetist and cave diver who played such a crucial role in the Tai cave rescue. Over in New Zealand, we have the son of Sir Edmund Hillary. We have Peter Hillary, who is a very much accomplished mountaineer in his own right. He's completed 7 summits on 7 continents, one of the first to do so, I believe. I'm also proud to say that we have Valerie Taylor, who is a global marine pioneer and conservationist, and I guess the Australians and the whole world, for that matter, really owe a debt of gratitude to Valerie, because a lot of us grew up watching the footage of the Barrier Reef and other marine environments that was shot by her and her husband, Ron. And for many of us, it was the first time we saw the underwater world and began to appreciate it. And back then, before conservation was even a concept, she was lobbying governments to protect their marine environments, trying to make them realize how special they were. And she was successful back then in having many places closed off and preserved. Another member who we all know is Dick Smith. Where do you start with Dick? He holds so many aviation awards, and just by special mention, the club in Australia. Dick Smith had a lot to do with the formation of the chapter in Australia. Back in the early 80s, the president of the Explorers Club in New York was a biospeciologist, and that's someone who studies the unique life forms that live inside the environment of a cave. And he was fascinated with the Chiligo caves behind Cairns, so he was coming out here regularly, and he would meet with our members who lived in Australia and encourage us to become our own chapter. And that's when Dick Smith got involved and later on Egyptologist Anne McFarlane and helped form our chapter. Dick Smith at the time was just flying the world's first solo flight around the world in a helicopter, of which he received the highest honour from the Explorers Club, which is the Lowell Thomas Award. Another member of note is a gentleman called Michael McDowell, who's probably Australia's most accomplished modern adventurer that we don't know too much about. Michael he's done many things, but most recently he operates a deep ocean expeditions, which he has coordinated. And he coordinates dives on the Titanic, the Bismarck, the Marianas Trench, and he also has an impressive private logistics company in Antarctica, which is a unique work environment. I don't know if you recall, but back in 2007, the Russians landed their two deep submersibles, the Mir. The Mir is underneath the North Pole at 4,500 meters, and ceremoniously claimed it for Russia. What people don't know is that the Russians actually hired Michael McDowell to be a major part of that expedition. And so important was his contribution that the Russian President Vladimir Putin has awarded him with the Russian Friendship Medal, something that is rarely given. And finally, Jessica Watson. 210 days at sea, she became the youngest person to sail non-stop around the world. So that's just a very brief snapshot. I can go on and on. And for each of these people, I've just mentioned a little bit of what they've done. It's so much more than that. It's really hard to fathom the amount of adventures and experiences these
I love it.
Had collectively.
It's 20 past here and it's just not cricket. If you're just joining us, we're on ABC Radio across Australia, and Todd Tai is the man you're listening to, my guest. He's the chair of the Australia and New Zealand chapter of the Explorers Club. So we went to the HQ in New York last week and we wanted to keep the conversation and find out about our own members. And as you just heard, what an incredible, disparate bunch they are. Let me ask you a question I asked Richard last week, as he was talking about, getting everybody together in the same room, the astronauts and the divers and the mountaineers, and he said it's quite an alpha group and it's quite a mixed bunch. And just describing the way you described the diversity of people in your club, I'm really curious. You got Valerie Taylor in her 80s and young Jessica Watson and Mike McDowell. When you get them all in the room, what do you find are the common things, the common threads that run through the room?
Well, I'd have to say the common thread is curiosity, or should I say curiosity in action. These are people who are currently doing an expedition or they're planning the next one. And if I could take it further out, our members want to know, what's around that mountain, what is underneath the ocean, what is around the next bay, and I think it goes back to the days. This attitude goes back to the days of the early explorers, back when they didn't know that the world was round, and they would go out in their sailing ships and they would have a map, and the map would have all the information that they knew was out there. So they knew that what country was next to them, they knew what island was out there, and they knew what was beyond that. But then they pushed a bit further, and they didn't know what was out there. So the pen lines on the map began to fade off because they didn't know it was there, and towards the edge of the map they didn't know what to put, so they drew a dragon. So every time these ships went out on more and more expeditions, they saw more of the world, they saw more countries, they saw more islands, and the map got filled in, got bigger, and eventually it rounded out on itself and became a planet. All the while, we're pushing the dragons back until we finally push them off the Earth. So can I just say, we're pushing dragons back.
We're pushing dragons back. And I love the idea that when you are all in a room and you're all getting together, it's not just sitting and glorying in adventures past. It sounds like everybody's always talking about what's next, the next adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much combined knowledge from the different types of adventure disciplines, but so many of those skills can be shared, and you know, knowledge from young to old to young, from different disciplines. It just gets shared in such a great environment, and I guess our role in Australia and New Zealand is to find opportunities to get our group of people together, and that in real terms means we hold about 10 events a year. We have.
But what are your events like? What do you actually do?
Well, we go to a beautiful venue like the Balmoral Boathouse in Sydney. We hire the whole thing out, and we invite all of our members to come and listen to a couple of presentations, have a few beers, and have a great boathouse meal. That's it in a nutshell. It's a great experience, not rocket science. But I find what happens at these events too, and I just want to make this clear. These are Explorers Club events by our chapter, but they're open to the public. So, you know, we could have, 60 people there. 20 people could be our members, but 40 people are non-members who are just fascinated with the club, and they look at the adventurers like they're sporting heroes, and they have the opportunity to be with them and talk to them and listen to their presentations.
Yeah.
So when we are an exclusive club, yes, we're not close to the public.
Right.
The public can come and listen to the stories and speak to these people the same way we do with each other.
I love that, because I'm exactly one of those plebs who'd never get in but would totally come along because I would just revel in that room and that incredible group of people. They've got a great website, and I imagine your events are listed on there. There's some beautiful pictures. So if you're on the interwebs, anzec.org, anzec.org, which of course is the acronym for the Australia-New Zealand chapter of the Explorers Club, and bravo on that acronym. That's very good. It's just coming up to 25 past here on It's Just Not Cricket ABC Radio. Todd Tai is the chair of ANZEC and is my guest. So check out that, and if you are able to, why wouldn't you go along to one of these events? They're just incredible. You're the chair, you're putting all these events together, but who are you? What do you do? What's your adventure?
Well, for me, I guess I've done a lot of things since 2002. I was going on long-range desert expeditions for Australian Geographic, and I think by way of mention, Australian Geographic has had a very long history in Australia, and there's a lot of synergies between Australian Geographic and the Australian and New Zealand chapter of Explorers Club. A lot of common members, so we're very much friends to each other. So I was taking people out on desert expeditions, marine research expeditions. I was running scientific research camps in the middle of nowhere in the Kimberleys, and that's basically my history. My next adventure is going to be Bikini Atoll, which will be the third nuclear ground zero site that I have visited. And this time my goal is to inspect the underwater navy, the sunken navy in that lagoon, which is wreck diving is one of my passions, and Bikini Atoll is very much an Everest in the world of diving.
I bet, well, not least because they dropped an atom bomb there, Todd. Is it a safe place to go? Is Godzilla going to be sleeping there?
Well, I guess if you like that movie Pacific Rim, and they have the rift where the monster comes out, if it's going to come out of anywhere, it's going to come out of Bikini Atoll. Bikini Atoll, they dropped the bomb there about 75 years ago, 80 years ago. If you stay on a boat, you're quite safe because the lagoon gets flushed twice a day with a full tide. So that's totally fine. The island, on the other hand, is definitely radioactive. You're not recommended to land. You certainly can't stay. But it's on the boat, you're completely fine. And just as a bit of an irony here, because of the dropping of the bomb and the nuclear testing there, it's been a no fishing zone in that lagoon for 80 years. So as a result, it's flourishing with marine life, which is really a bit ironic, when you can look at Chernobyl as well. It too is flourishing with marine life, with wildlife. Why? Because we dropped nuclear bombs there.
Because we've left it alone for 80 years, you're not really sure what you're going to find.
And we've left it alone for 80 years. Yeah, maybe the sharks have got three eyes, but the marine life is teeming.
The sharks will be in the water saying, "Hey Todd, welcome. I heard your interview on It's Just Not Cricket. Great to have you here. Now I'm going to eat you."
Well, maybe like Dr. Evil, where the sharks have laser beams or something. But anyway, it's untouched, and
Wow.
there's a whole aircraft carrier sitting there in about, the deck is about 28 meters of water, and you can go in there and explore it, and that's just one of ships. There's German battleships, there's everything. So anyway, you asked my next adventure.
That is quite an adventure, and I assume you'll show us some photographs from Bikini Atoll, because it sounds like it will be amazing, up on the anzac.org website. Great to have you, Todd. One quick final question. It's such a great job title, Chair of the Australia-New Zealand Chapter of the Explorers Club. When you tell people that that is what you do, is there a common question or reaction you always get?
Well, the usual question is, how do you become a member of that club?
Yeah.
I get that all the time. Yeah, so
We're all
and then
trying.
Go into the story of, we are a group of 3,500 people worldwide, all cut from the same cloth. I'm sure Richard has told you some of the members that you can meet when you go international to the HQ, and I guess that's the benefit of membership. I mean, I was at the club, and I've met Jim Lovell, the commander of Apollo 13. I've met so many people. So if I guess one way to say it is, I don't follow a football club. The people I worship are adventurers. So when I go to the Explorers Club, both my own chapter and also to New York, all of my heroes are all around me.
I love that. Look, so good to talk to you. Thank you for sharing some time with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Glenn.
Todd Tai there, the chair of the Australia and New Zealand chapter of the Brilliant Explorers Club. We explored them and found them last week. The adventure continues. I'll put a link to the website up on my Facebook page. It's Just Not Cricket with Glenn Greensmith, but ANZEC, ANZEC.org. We're going to keep this conversation going, because what a fascinating group of people. Just love it.